Welcome to the Mr. R Show, presented by the MRR Institute. This podcast is designed specifically for tax professionals looking to scale and modernize their practice by maximizing revenue through resources. Join us as we explore expert strategies, innovative tools, and actionable advice to help you navigate the evolving landscape of the tax industry. Whether you're aiming to grow your business or enhance your client experience, you're in the right place. Now, let's get to the show and transform your practice together.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Mr. R Show. Today, we're going to look at a topic, right? So I know you're here not only for the fantastic topics that we cover, but you also get a free CPE. So you're probably here for a number of reasons. But as always, the guests that we bring on this show, we dive into some specific topics that you might not know everything about, but something you can obviously show up here. You hang out with us for a little while. You basically eavesdrop in on a conversation you just will not hear at your local Starbucks or your Panera or wherever you hang out. These get pretty in-depth on these topics, but also with the guests too. They share a lot of things and how they got into them. So Chris, I'm going to let you go ahead and introduce the guest here. But as we really dive into this one, I know we spoke a little bit before we hit the record button here with this guest. They definitely didn't get into the conventional route, which I'm really excited to hear about.
Well, I am too, and I have been waiting for the right person to come on the show for a while to talk about family offices, excuse me, and specifically virtual family offices. It's been something that even as a practicing CPA for over 20 years, I don't have a ton of experience with, or I don't have a great understanding of exactly what a typical virtual family office does for a client. I imagine that many other tax professionals feel the same way. So we are very fortunate to be joined by Taylor Ranker. He is coming from Questmont Virtual Family Office. I met one of Taylor's business partners, David, while teaching tax season updates in beautiful Tampa, Florida. Luckily, I was there in December. That was a treat. The weather was perfect. I got to go back in March, but I was running around following the Detroit Tigers for spring training baseball, which has nothing to do with virtual family offices, but met David at an educational event. We're in the same mastermind group, peer-to-peer mastermind group, and was able to meet Taylor, and we're very fortunate to have him as a guest today. Welcome to the Mr. R Show.
Thanks for having me, gents. Appreciate it. Hope I have something with value to share.
Oh, you've got a lot of value to share. I'm excited for you to walk us through your journey and what a virtual family office is. We are always trying to put more feathers in our cap as tax professionals, and just understanding that specialization continues to be the way most of us operate. And that one of the pillars of the MRR Institute, who brings you this podcast, is that we believe in collaboration over competition. And I've been in the business long enough where CPAs and enrolled agents and tax professionals didn't talk to each other. And now I think what's very important that we collaborate and work together in the best interests of each of our clients, because quite frankly, taxes are very specialized. So can you tell us a little bit about your background? And I know you grew up in the Midwest like John and I, but yeah, can you tell us a little bit about your background, how you came to get into this business, and where you have the pleasure of residing now?
Well, let me start with what is a virtual family office? It is a unique structure where we bring the best experts in the world in lifestyle and finance together for our clients. And so when we research our clients and get to know our clients, and they are typically ultra high net worth, I can cover that more later. But I will say this, Chris, they tend to be millionaires. They have M's behind their name, not B's, right? Not billionaires. And that's a significant, we'll come to that, right? And so the collaboration, I love that you pointed that out, because effectively all a virtual family office is the coordination of the collaboration of the experts, coordination and collaboration, right? So when we interview wealthy families and we say, 80% of them want a family office, and we really drill down, and what we're really getting out of them is that really what they're saying is they don't necessarily need a family office like Bill Gates. Bill Gates has a separate company called Cascade Investments. To my knowledge, they employ over 300 people. Our clients don't need that, but what they want is a coordinated experience. They want someone who is the general leading all the lieutenants and captains, right? So the virtual family office is tasked with coordinating the tax professionals, the absolute experts like yourself, but also asset protection, charitable giving, um, obviously wealth management, portfolio, liquidity, all of that. So that is in its essence what a virtual family office. Now, I was born in a small farm town in Pennsylvania, had for the first 14 years, perfect white picket fence experience, great mom and dad, pretty good at sports. I loved painting. This is a key thing, I think, in my journey. I was an artist. So when I say I love painting, pictures, not houses, right? So I was a good athlete, but I would lock myself in my bedroom all weekend and paint. And my dad was like, what the hell is wrong with my son, right? So I had this perfect life. However, it was the 70s. I was born in 1964. And so I was starting to make a couple little bad life decisions in my neighborhood, right? And then my father got a job in Los Angeles, and Chris, poof. In 90 days, I went from being the perfect kid in a perfect farm town to living in Southern California, right? And I think within 4 years, quite frankly, I was homeless. I ended up homeless briefly. Homeless in the sense, and I did it to myself. Let me be very clear. I just was angry at my mom and dad. Turned out to be a wonderful thing, but I was angry. I was young and stupid. So I started a party, and you can imagine late 70s, early 80s in Southern California, there was all kinds of trouble to be had. And so I just started to make these bad life decisions. And within 4 years, I was not homeless like shopping cart homeless, but homeless like I had no address for 6 months or a year. So I did a lot of couch surfing, slept in my car, and actually ended up back in Pennsylvania and ended up, I hate to say this, but I made some bad decisions and I ended up crashing in a police station. I wasn't arrested. I actually went in there after a night of partying, and it was a winter storm. And I said, can I sleep here? And the year was 1987. And they said, yes. That was what I call my bottom, Chris. And I hope I'm not frightening your guests. It was just I'm like, I'm smarter than this. I was raised better than this. So I persuaded my parents to let me come back home. So now the year is 1987. I moved back home to Southern California, and they made me sign a contract which said, you will have no rights in our home. You will get a job, and you will turn over all your paychecks to your mom. So I did that, and I really didn't have any choices because I hadn't gone to college, Chris. I had basically dropped out, and now I'm 3 years old. And so my father, I got a job selling tires. That was the best job I could get. When my dad realized I was genuinely good with people, I liked serving them, I liked helping, I liked putting packages, but I was working 6 days a week, making 20 grand a year. So my dad's like, look, son, you should try to, if you're good at sales, sell cards, sell real estate, sell life insurance, right? So that kind of led me down. I got a job at an auto insurance agency. And the guy I worked for, I was kind of their hack, their cold calling hack. The guy that I worked for, however, sold whole life, universal life, mutual funds, IRAs, annuities. And I was mind blown with these wealth building tools. And I remember the day I went running home to my dad that night. I'm like, Dad, look at these cool vehicles. And he's like, hey, knucklehead, let me sit down here at the kitchen table. And he actually pulled out his actual portfolio of his IRAs. And it turns out he had a small life insurance policy on me and my sister. And so that launched me down that path. I interviewed with Merrill Lynch, Prudential, New York Life. None of them would talk to the loser that had been Taylor, right? So fortunately, my dad's company, the Equitable Ohio, gave me a shot. And I was smart enough, Chris, to go, this is a huge opportunity. So I cleaned up my act, didn't touch a can of beer, literally weekends. And so for 3 years, I just learned how to sell their products. And so I was being the good guy and the bad guy. I was redeeming myself, but I was selling insurance to anyone and everyone, even if they didn't need it. So I openly admit, Chris, for the first 7 years of my career, I was the bad guy. Here I am 35 years later, and I like to say I'm paying penance for those first 7 years. Yeah. So they then, that life insurance company said, hey, Taylor, we know you're from Central PA. We know you had roots here. And they made my first wife and I an offer, a really good offer, dangled it like, look how good you could live in Harrisburg, PA versus Southern California. So they persuaded me to move back, quickly got divorced. And I realized, though I was good at sales, I could do lots of transactions. I wanted to do more. Like I wanted to do planning. I wanted to solve problems. I didn't like that transactional model, Chris. And so anyway, eventually I partnered up with 2 other fellas, and we were very cutting edge. We started becoming fiduciaries in 1996, which means we would actually charge you to do a budget, do a basic financial plan, help your family. So we were moving, and that's been a whole 30-some-year journey now.
Wow. Well, I'm going to give your mom credit for inventing the family office in your life, right? You handed over your paycheck, and she helped you manage it. And she might have charged a little less than you guys charge, but that's all right. I think that you had, like many of us, you had an aha moment, and that could be, we've all had them as tax professionals, or you might be living one right now, and in pivot points, and so you had that aha moment, and sleeping in the police station, and that's powerful, right? Because you've got to you some that it's only up from there. You know what I mean? And then you, but some of the things you learned when you were selling tires and life insurance are just traits. You always take your traits with you. I mean, probably my most prominent job I had was being a Detroit newspaper boy. Like, I talk about it a lot because I had to drive my little bike around half the time it was snowy out. I had to pay wholesale for the papers. I had to go and I had to make my own profit margins. I had to go collect the money from people, we wouldn't do this anymore, would we? Knock on random people's doors, handle cash. I had a little ledger. No one had credit cards at that time because this is 35 years ago. And I had to do an accounting and be good with people, but also meet people where they're at. So we were in a very blue collar area in the Detroit, outside of Detroit. So when did I collect? Fridays, because I know people got paid. Unless you were, like an old Sicilian guy, which were some of my route, I would go over Sunday after they had some red wine and they had their family over because I knew they'd give me a good tip because they wanted to show off a little. So but those traits that you learned even through those years of maybe you could say just development, struggle, or whatever. Now, coming out the other end of it, you're doing, you know, you're doing awesome.
Well, and I am. Thank you. It occurs to me that we talked about this a little bit before, that part of why we've built this virtual family office is because I'm an entrepreneur, business owner. Like, we have a unique structure here that does tax planning. So we're going to get to that. But quite a bit of what our clients want, need, and deserve is tax planning. But most of them are entrepreneurs. So what I can't say this was an epiphany, Chris, but I was actually building out the services that would protect a family like me, right? So I was kind of mirroring my journey, that I'm building these services, not directly for me, but my experience was informing it. Like, we have this thing I wrote about in my recent book called the circle of vultures. As a family gets more wealthy, they have a target on their back. That's just a fact. Think about, there's an entire industry of people who fake car accidents, right? That's the whole thing. So sadly, the circle of vultures is, sometimes that comes from outside the fort. Sometimes that comes from inside the fort. So it can look like your golf buddy, right? Who says, "Hey, Chris, you need to put $1 million in this real estate deal." He probably doesn't have your best interest at heart, but it also can be a life insurance agent, a stockbroker, or a realtor who realizes, someone sells a business and all of a sudden every financial advisor in their county calls them. Well, where the hell were you the 2 or 3 years before where they needed the tax planning, the liquidity planning, the asset? They weren't there. So we built the family office. In fact, what we've become known for, quite frankly, is two things. In our particular firm, we've become known for taking extreme ownership over a client's problems and challenges. And we've also become very known for nailing the planning so well, have it buttoned down so much so that their family will never have to pay a price. That's a key motive.
Well, and we're going to talk about in a few minutes, which you nailed that too. We're going to talk about how you deliver value, how you define your value, and if you can't self-define exactly what avatars that you're trying to help as a tax professional, then your clients are defining what you're doing. So you've got to define who you're trying to work with. Now, you might have some outliers out there, but for our practice, we have a certain way of doing things, a couple different avatars we're trying to work with. And if we didn't have that, like the first 10 years of my practice, I didn't have that. I had no sales process. It was, "Are you willing to pay us? And is it legal?" Okay, I don't know. Maybe I've never done a 990 tax return, but guess what? I'm going to blow my whole weekend if I had to figure it out and make $200. That was, now, but that was just, it was undefined. And you guys have defined that. Um, and, and, and you're doing it well. So now you guys are based in Tampa, right? To take us from getting from Pennsylvania to Tampa, and you're probably going to say, "Oh, I probably just drove because I had a lot of stuff." But how did you?
So having this weird journey from Pennsylvania to Southern California back to Pennsylvania, I was never, let's be honest, I was never going to be fully content in central Pennsylvania again after having been exposed. Right. So I had come down here on some business trips in the 90s. And then my little sister actually followed me back to Pennsylvania, lived with me for a while, and finished college there. So she did me a huge favor. In 2004, she landed a teaching job in Hillsborough County, which is Tampa, right? That was in '04. And I said, well, she's a school teacher. I wasn't wealthy, but I was pretty successful at that point. I said, look, I'll buy a townhouse or a second home and we'll share it. You live in it. So in 2005, I bought a townhouse. And at that point, I was a bachelor again. And so I was just coming down for 2-3 months a year, and she lived in it, took care of it, and I gave her some of the equity. And then, damn it, if I didn't meet Sonia, the love of my life and current business partner, the next year. So that plan kind of blew up. But the point is my little sister's still here. My parents are here in Tampa. So I had this connection, and Sonia and I then raised our son, Ian, and we would come down here 2 or 3 months. But that was all, Chris, that wasn't business. That was just our getaway. But we loved it. It's a very folksy place, kind of big city, but kind of not. And so during COVID, at that point, I actually had 3 business partners, my wife and 2 others in Pennsylvania. We decided to physically launch a branch in Tampa because, quite frankly, I hate to admit this, but I spent 30 years building this business in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. But quite frankly, I built a Ruth's Chris in an area that doesn't drink wine and it's vegan.
Right. No, exactly. I mean,
so central Pennsylvania, there just wasn't enough complexity and wealth. And we were building something out of the box. They would rather, most of the folks there, God bless them, but they didn't want change. So we decided to expand, and really the avatars that we do really impact are here more than they're there. So we subsequently sold the majority of the Pennsylvania business to those 2 majority partners. And I did rebuild in the last 5 years a team of 8 of us here in Tampa. And so I was just going to share that there are, because you mentioned this, if I might, the 3 avatars, there are 3 types of families that we can impact. And we call them, number 1, flourishing families. They tend to be entrepreneurs and executives or dual income, high net worth households. And they have tax problems, planning problems, complexity. Their net worth is up to 25 million. And then we have what we call the thriving families. They tend to be business owners, entrepreneurs. Their net worth is 25 to 50 million. They're often looking for tax strategy, very proactive tax planning, and also possibly succession or liquidity events. And then the third area is we call them the distinguished families. They always have net worths north of 50 million. And at that point, those are families who the wealth is established, but now they want to make sure it aligns with their dreams and their values and their beliefs. So that's a different set. And there are plenty of those here. And how we do this is one of the tools we use is we actually give them a high net worth personality test. There are 9 proven psychographic profiles of wealth. So one family member might be a family steward, which means the wealth to them is all about protecting the family. But another one might be someone like a VIP. To them, wealth means status and they want nice cars and nice homes. But then you might have one that's called a financial phobic. They love having the wealth, but they abhor the minutia of having to deal with it. So we make sure that we're dealing with the personalities where we can really impact them. We actually use that, Chris, as a marital tool as well, help them align their personalities together.
Absolutely. And because you're going to have, there's just different communication tools and beyond the disc analysis. I mean, there's some people, we did this, we had a larger team at one point until I had my aha moment, but where we had like 28 people on our team. And I'll give you an example. Some people, I got a couple examples. Here's the best example, but this is between my wife and I verbalize to crystallize, meaning Taylor, if we're driving down the street and you're like, hey man, what do you want to eat? I'm like, I don't know, man. I'm kind of hungry. Although kind of might feel like chicken. Pizza sounds good, but gosh, I don't want to have all that grease. Maybe I'll just, I don't know. Maybe let's go to, the Tigers are on, or, let's go to B-Dubs and watch a game or something. Okay, fine. And you're like, all right, where my wife's doing all this in her mind, not saying anything. So when I ask her and she's just thinking, I'm like, give me something. What are you thinking? You're killing, but so she's driving me nuts, but I'm driving her nuts because her way of communicating is, okay. And just like juggling, some people are jugglers with their tasks. Some people are not jugglers. So if you work in an all physical office, if you're like, I'm a juggler. If you came through my office and said, hey, I need you for a second, I could put down what I'm doing and look at that and come back. And neither of them are right or wrong, but a non-juggler, it really upsets them. So how do you kind of deal with that? So I love that matchmaking on personality that you come up with, because I'm sure you've done the flip side of it. I'm sure you've done some personality, I don't know, profiling or analysis, or how your brain works, on your own team, for your team too.
We do use the disc for that. Before I go on, though, let me point out there are 9 of these psychographic profiles, but there are 2 of them that we won't work with.
Okay. What are they?
There is the person who is high net worth, ultra high net worth, and their approach to wealth is what we call the gambler. That would be the guy, Chris, who would say, I just sold my business for 30 million. Let's put it all in crypto. Well, not about family, not about community, not about even lifestyle. And I'm going to say it, and I don't mean it to sound too judgy, but they've got an unhealthy relationship with wealth, I might argue, right? It's just something or that they don't, but it's an unfillable hole. We can't ever, our team can't meet their expectations. There's another one called the accumulator. And you would say, well, Taylor, you run an elite wealth management family office firm. Why wouldn't you want someone who has the wealth profile and accumulator? What that means in our world is they have a hoarding relationship with their money. It's not about family, community, charity. It's about more. So what we've learned is that if they score really high in that profile,
Yeah.
right. So we can temper that though. Like if their spouse scores really high in family steward and they have something else, then maybe you can work. But we're very leery of, you're just not going to be able to get these families ever happy.
Right.
And we do have a limited psychic bandwidth ourselves. So we have to be, so I will say we're selective about the families we work with, because it is a virtual family office. We work with a very few number of families. It's not measured by assets under management. It's measured by other criteria.
Well, I want to talk about that next, because the typical tax preparer, and our private CP firm's different because we're on a subscription model and we've been that way for over a decade. So we only bring on 30 new clients a year, which would be crazy for you guys, I would imagine. But that's not that many in the bigger picture. But our retention's high, and what we do is real sticky. It's hard to leave because we treat people well, and there's a synergy as we move on. Where the typical tax professional, there's a low barrier to entry. They could bop around between tax professionals each year, and there's no penalty, or it's easy to leave. And so my question is, how does it for you guys? I mean, for me, I'm just thinking about it's got to be challenging because there aren't as many potential clients out there for you guys as other people. However, when you find that one or two, it's like could be a really good fit. So how do you go about, let's go through the lead generation and client selection. You mentioned your avatars, but where are you getting most of your clients? I know you guys do a lot of educational events. You're involved with, but I know you might collaborate with other tax professionals. So how are you finding the avatars you're looking for?
Almost exclusively, they're sent to us by CPAs. 90% of the families we onboard that are new, and occasionally it'll be an attorney, or like we did recently have a company here in Tampa that does phenomenal work with group captives. And they sent us a gentleman who owns two contracting businesses, and he's with one of your typical large wealth managers who's actually a life insurance company. And so it's normally, Chris, it's CPAs, and it's CPAs who are aware, quite frankly, that their clients deserve more. And it's So, and so we actually have a business model where we tell those CPAs the client is first. We actually call this, Chris, everyone wins. It's the philosophy we use. The client is always first. The CPA is always second in that relationship. So even when we're introduced, they're still the leader. If we're doing any kind of planning meeting with their client, it's their client. And then my firm, Questmont Virtual Family Office, is last. So we keep that in mind, but it's almost always CPAs.
So what does that look like as far as, let's say, Susie Snowcone is a CPA in the middle of Missouri. She's got a client that, owns half the town, and they only have $40 million of net assets. Susie's a little overwhelmed because this is her outlier client, but you can't put a price on trust. Susie connects with you guys and says, I want you to meet with my client. Does Susie then exit like the tax preparation, the payroll, the bookkeeping? How do you divvy up like what you guys are helping out with and what Susie is?
So Susie will not get replaced or diminished. In fact, Susie will always stay key. Our business model, because our families are millionaires, not billionaires, typically they don't want the infrastructure of having Susie on their payroll or an attorney on their payroll. They don't need it, right? Like they might need a good asset protection attorney once every 3 to 5 years. They don't need them on their payroll. So in our business model, Chris, we have vetted professionals nationwide through our network where if let's say Susie brings us in and we discover they need an asset protection attorney.
Sure.
If they have a really good one the family's already working with, we will lead the way with that attorney, right? However, if not, it is our job to replace their existing attorney, which they've often outgrown. I hate to say this. In this case, if Susie brings us to the table, we wouldn't. But in some cases, we have to replace the CPA because they've never done a $20 million transaction before. So it is our job. The bottom line, Chris, is it's either our job usually to engage with their current professionals, but to have vetted professionals on our bench to bring in at a moment's notice. And so we actually kind of prepare our clients where we might be doing, Chris, a quarterly strategy session. Like typically we're seeing our families every quarter. And we tell them we never know who's going to be on that call because we're going to bring in a vetted professional, whether it's business analytics, tax planning, asset protection, lifestyle. We don't know. I mean, we know, but it might be the lead advisory team is going to be there, but we might be bringing you in. Right? Solve a particular tax problem. It's very bespoke. I mean, it is every family. Let me make this clear. Every family we work with has a truly custom team. Right? Because they might have a CPA we brought them. Usually not. Usually the CPA brings us to the table, but then we have to build out the rest of the infrastructure and make sure that they're collaborating.
And that's what we talk about. We, in our private CPA practice, we've developed a proprietary tax planning process. But I tell people the process is the same. The results are always unique because everyone's different. What does it look like? So in that initial, because if someone that's listening to this, that's thinking about those outlier clients that they might need some help with, they want to collaborate with the virtual family office like yourself. It's probably scary for the accountant to trust that, right? Like, oh gosh, we're bringing in this resource. That first meeting, are you guys doing some type of like discovery or kind of figuring out, what the needs assessment or anything, something like that?
Well, let me back up because this is such a deep part. Working with the CPA world is such a deep part of what we do. We actually just released an article that we wrote in conjunction with our national partners. It's called The 3 Best Practices of Tax Accountants. And I can give you the executive summary. Here are the 3 gripes that wealthy business owners have. You ready? They hate your fees. They don't like your fees, but they don't like your fees, and don't kill the messenger, right? Because they perceive a lack of value. And when we dig into what does that mean, here are their 2 complaints about the lack of value. They don't think you're proactive, and they don't think that you truly understand them deeply. So it's really, if you want to be a top performing CPA, you just have to overcome those 3 hurdles. Yeah, you must be proactive. You must have the right avatar of a client. I should have said that. But you also, and here's what we have found. If we can save a client $100,000 in taxes on this strategy and that strategy, guess what? Guess how they feel about paying the CPA 10 or 15 or 20? Happily. So let me start from that situation, right? That we understand this dynamic better than almost any wealth advisor in the country, I think. I would say we're really good at that. But there's definitely a deep discovery where the CPA would involve getting to know the family intimately. And in some cases, let me clarify this, because we are an operating business. In some cases, we do actually have partnerships with these CPA firms where we share the revenue. I need to disclose that, right? So we do that, but that would typically be with the entire firm, right? So we'll provide services in those three avatars, even if sometimes they have an existing wealth management arm, but not at the elite family office level. That's more of a rudimentary. So in some cases, the CPA is actually getting revenue from this, which is fully disclosed to the
Oh,
business
yeah.
owner, fully disclosed to them. And I can also say for the CPAs listening to this, 100% of the clients that we've dealt with over the last 25 years love that. They actually prefer that their CPA and their wealth advisor family office team are working together because we don't negotiate our fees in that sense. So they're going to pay us what they're going to pay us. We can either have the partnership with the CPA or not, but it does force the collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
So for the CPAs who are more entrepreneurial, we go down that path.
Gotcha.
But we would never, like if a CPA, by the way, we also wrote or put out a piece here recently on the 10 sort of limiting beliefs of CPAs, right? There are 10 things that rightly so, they're concerned about introducing them to a wealth advisor. Reputational risk. Is it going to be worth their time? I can get to that later. I can get to that article later.
No, yeah, that'd be good to know. It's very interesting.
So this point, the bottom line is the CPA is involved with the discovery as much as they want to be, or as little. In some cases, they really are busy and they've vetted us and they trust us, and they just know. Like there's still two firms in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, that one is a lawyer who introduced the business exit last year, $30 million medical company, and one is a CPA firm that we still collaborate with.
And what are your core services as a virtual family office?
So let me address that. Probably the best way I can address that is by how we bill. Okay. Yes, we do manage portfolios in a world-class way. So probably 70% of the business side is revenue managing money. We do that phenomenally. And then we do something that most wealth advisors don't. So for example, one of our recent clients who was sent to us by a CPA firm out of the Northeast, right? The business is doing about 70 million in revenue. There are several partners. One of the partners has an alcohol problem. And so took a bunch of money out of the business a few years ago for some, like hundreds of thousands, which forced our partner who hired us to also take hundreds of thousands out to keep it, but he had to pay taxes on that distribution. What we're working on a $7,000 or $8,000 a month retainer, but we're doing things like helping them pay off a tax debt. We're doing things like helping him that they didn't have an operating agreement, right? Or a partnership agreement, a buy-sell. So how do we get the alcohol addicted partner out, right? So we're helping them get a valuation done. But in that case, there's no money to manage. We're acting as a true family office where we're representing the family that's retained us. In most cases, there are portfolios and there's a liquidity event. So that's how we build. And the services are, and I want to try to make this clear, it is a lifelong, multi-generational process. Let me say that again, Chris. When a family retains us or we agree to work with the family, it is we are now working with grandkids of some of our original clients, right? So here it is. You ready? The basics are these key areas, right? So number one is investment consulting. Almost every one of them needs that. Number two is tax planning, wealth enhancement, right? 3 would be asset protection. Like I said, they become more risky, the circle of vultures, right? And then you get into estate, passing the assets down to the ones you love. And then finally, you get into philanthropy and charitable planning. Can I run with that a little bit? So those are the key areas that we cover. It does get increasingly, as we've been doing this longer, more into lifestyle. So for example, we actually have a life transition counselor on the team. Like we know that if you're going to sell your business that you've been running for 30 or 40 years, you're going to be a mess. We know that. Half the time you're going to be a mess. We've had people go into depression. because you're the big dog. And then all of a sudden you get a big check and you're done, right? And you didn't have a good plan. And so we will try to have the counselor come in as much as a year in advance and work with them. So but that would come out of the fee they're already paying us. That comes out of my firm's pocket. We have things like World Telehealth, concierge medicine. So we'll actually connect them with those services. But the core services are the financial ones first. And I want to share a little bit of research. So one of our national family office partners does research. And here, and please accountants, don't get mad at me. Okay.
I'm sure they won't.
Like 80, I can't remember the exact research. It's in the book. So if I could find it in the book, it's like 80% of wealthy families, and this is kind of a duh. I can find it. Or they want proactive. Here it is. 89.2% of wealthy investors want proactive tax planning. Approximately 90% of CPAs and wealth advisors claim to do proactive tax planning. However, only 24.8% of wealthy investors are receiving proactive tax planning. Sorry, kids, that means my industry and your industry are not on it. 87.3% of wealthy investors want charitable planning, but only 6% are actually receiving the guidance and the advice. So we start with just filling those gaps. And let me say this, almost always the family that retains us is either already paying for us elsewhere. They have a money manager, they have an insurance agent, they're overpaying their taxes. So like 100% of the time, whatever fee we charge them pays itself back in spades. And usually they're already paying it.
And I like that you mentioned they might not be paying another professional for all of it, but they're paying what we call your involuntary business partner, the government. So they're paying a tax. They're paying a tax for lack of action.
One of our team members, Chris, we were just working on this at a team retreat last week, and we were talking about our avatars. So we're training we hired a couple new team members and we're training them. And one of the things we like to say is if you don't work with a virtual family office like ours, the IRS becomes your business partner, unwelcome. And what our new team member, I got to give a shout out to Alex, said, oh, you mean like the IRS becomes your new bestie?
Well, word red, bestie.
And I don't know if this resonates with you guys with this. So this is going back probably 15 years. I know I said this on one of our other podcasts. I don't know if it was this show or not. Here I was, a young marketing guy in a small room of attorneys in South Carolina, wanted to do a little marketing presentation. I think it was probably like, hey guys, you've been doing this for 40 years. This is what social media is. And I spun on a whim the definition of ROI, and it's completely relatable to what you said. You say, oh, I forgot verbatim, but it was, hey guys, do you know what the definition of ROI or what that means? And, nobody said anything. They probably all knew what it meant, return on investment. But I twisted it on him. I said, actually, in y'all's industry, we could say that it's risk of ignorance. And the whole room stayed silent again, and it scared the living crap out of me as in my 20s in a room, very intimidated. So I don't know if that's the same kind of route that you guys were thinking there.
One of the quotes, John, in my book is inertia is insidious. Inertia is one of the biggest challenges we face, Chris, is these families are frustrated that they don't know how to fix it. Like we had a family that retained us about a year and a half ago said, we didn't even know people like you existed. Like they didn't know. They didn't know if they qualified. They didn't know we existed. And one of our clients, we helped him sell a business. He had been told by his parents, don't ever hire a financial advisor. Don't ever hire a financial advisor. I get that. They wouldn't have wanted to hire me 30 years ago, right? I was the bad guy. I would have sold them whatever. But their situation had evolved where it was complex and they had a business to sell. And now they actually are like producing videos to help to like say, hey, go out and get a virtual family office. So it was interesting to watch them evolve. And like we were actually able to help negotiate the sale of business. My team actually helped on the asset purchase agreement and the letter of intent, got them a 30% premium above their initial offer. And that was directly related to my investment banker and my internal team knowing what the value of the business was actually worth. We just said, nope, you're not going to do that to our client. And then we had a tax strategy too. We were able to save them millions on the exit.
I say this John's sick of hearing me say this. Ideas are cheap, implementation is valuable. So we're not suggesting that you go implement any of these. but just to kind of get an idea of some of the things that people at that level consider.
So we actually use what we call the Questmont tax matrix, right? And it's actually a visual, and it's 4 quadrants. So personal tax strategies, simple. Personal tax strategies, complex. Business tax strategy, simple. Business tax strategies, complex. So frankly, candidly, even if there's a strategy we believe a client ought to use, we do have to match that to the wealthy person's personality, right? Like someone who's a financial phobic is not going to go for one of the more complex strategies. They're just not. It's going to blow up their mind, even if it could save them millions and millions, right? So some of the so I want to put it through that lens. There's too many to cover, but here's a simple one. We have a client, we represent one of the 4 business owners that they happen to be in different states, and the business is up in the Northeast in a high tax state. So they're currently operating as an S Corp. However, they treat it like a C Corp because of the high taxes in that state. And again, I'm not a CPA, right? I describe myself as the maestro who plays one instrument. So I need you guys because I need the rest of the damn orchestra. So we're doing our analysis with this group, and we realize they're an S Corp. They want to sell. They think the thing's worth north of 100 million. We haven't had it valued yet. But our particular client is very charitable. Like, so let's say he's going to bail out with 40 or 50 million. He and his wife want to put some of that in charity. So we do our analysis and we're like, look, a couple things we could do here. We could convert back to a C Corp. And under the new law, I think it's 3 years now. There's a waterfall for the QSBS, Qualified Small
QS
Business.
Section 1202. Yeah.
1202. Yep. Thank you, sir. And so what we're saying is you might want to consider, because they haven't actually gone to market yet, you might want to consider converting back to the C Corp. That's one benefit. If you can percolate it for at least 3 years, it's probably going to take them 3 years until they get it cleaned up, go to market anyway. And the other reason is we can take the C Corp shares, not the S Corp shares, and put some of those into a charitable remainder trust. Well, let's just say my guy is going to get $40 million and we take $5 million of it and we choose to put those shares in the charitable remainder trust, which again, we can't do with the S Corp, but we can do that prior to the sale. Number one, he's going to get a tax deduction in the year of the sale, so it helps offset some of the tax hit. 2, he's actually going to get more income. Here's why. So let's say we put $5 million in. That's $5 million that goes in. If he took those 5 million shares and sold it, he's going to net about 3.7 million. So now we invest the 3.7 versus the 5 million. They're earning the same, let's say, at the 6 or 7% rate of return. So he's going to get more lifetime actual family income by putting those shares in the charitable trust. And at their death, whatever we've grown it to goes to the charity. Beautiful strategy. But that's got to be done in advance of the sale, right? Things like there's a strategy we use, a long-short strategy. It's a phenomenal investment strategy. There's a couple of really qualified money managers across the country that we've vetted, are the best in the world at this. And essentially, you use a portfolio where they'll buy, the money manager will actively buy mostly large cap stocks, and their track record is phenomenal. It's up 20% this year. Very good track record. But they also do a lot of shorting in the portfolio. And if you think of it, the stock market's up 75% of the time. So they do these short bets, but most of the time those short bets expire, right? So what's happening is the money's growing over time, but then even in a year of down market, because of the shorts, it helps keep the portfolio from going down as much, but it creates what we call synthetic losses.
Mm-hmm.
We also use a leverage. So the client can either just invest the money, or they can let us use some leverage, which doubles or triples the power. So for example, if they walked in, we have one business owner, construction firm, they got about 30 million excess in cash in the company. And we're like, look, let's invest some of this in this strategy a year before. And if you let us crank up the heat, we're going to be able to create 70% on the dollar. So for every million they put in, it'll grow, but we're going to create 700,000 of losses that they can use in the year to offset the sale.
Right. And that's, we talk that in our world, tax agencies are your involuntary business partner. So think about it. You've got to do that in advance, but usually it's a real bummer. They can only deduct up to $3,000 a year, married joint of capital losses. However, if you know you're going to have an exit in the next few years, you might as well use your portfolio to, the strategy is, so we use a whole process where we diagnose and prescribe clients based on colors, because people understand colors: red, green, purple, gold. Red is a high marginal tax rate. Red diagnosis means a capital loss. You want to generate capital losses. Capital loss harvesting is that's the prescription. Well, someone might say, well, I don't have capital losses. Well, you could create them using a strategy like this, using leverage so you have basis to increase that capital. So maybe for the next 2 years you do this, and then you walk in your exit with, like you said, a couple $1 million of capital losses to absorb. And if you hold on to those assets, then you get the basis step up down the road anyway. So that's where I think, it's so important to be thinking in advance and not running around with your pants on fire.
Yeah, amen. I'm not a terribly religious guy. I am spiritual. So can I just say amen to that?
Absolutely.
Our biggest frustration is, like I mentioned, what we're known for is just taking this extreme ownership of client problems. It does happen where a client doesn't retain us and we know we can impact them, hit home runs, and you just can't get them to see it. And that's why I talk about in the book, and inertia is insidious. It's getting them to see the bigger picture. Sometimes they usually have to have some pain point that brings them to consider this next step. Because sometimes they're having to fire their golf buddy, their big broker guy, right? Their sister. And seeing, like, we have a family right now, they have two, I don't want to get sued, but two of the biggest wirehouses and brokerages managing about $6 million for them. They're paying over $60,000 a year in fees, but they're coming to me to do the exit planning. Why the hell is that?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to say it, that's because those guys aren't qualified to do what I'm talking about. They don't want to get knowledgeable, right? It's what we do is very, very crisp, very difficult to actually execute. It takes a team. Like I'll do this real quick. Our structure is my boutique, and then we are part of a family office consultancy that's national and one of the best in the world. And then we are very integrated with the $7 trillion trust company. So when a client writes us a check, it's not sitting on the Questmont platform. It's physically protected at this large trust company. So, but we don't work for them. I don't get a W-2. I work for the family. So I want to be clear. Our structure was very carefully built so that we can do these things, but provide this boutique experience to protect the family.
Right. And as far as your virtual family office, I know you work on tax planning, tax mitigation. Do you guys prepare tax returns as well? Or does that typically where the CPA that referred you the work will take care of the tax compliance piece?
We currently do not. We've honestly debated that, and we currently do. What does happen, though, what is really a thing of beauty for the CPA, so I want your CPAs to hear this. First and foremost, again, we're going to help the client in ways they've never been helped, that they deserve. Like I love to say, these awful business owners who create all the jobs, pay all the taxes, pay all the healthcare, us evil 1%ers, right? They are the folks that we work with that do this stuff. They deserve better, right? So usually it's the CPA recognizing there's this gap. So we're going to first and foremost protect them and fill that gap. But we don't want to do the tax returns. But here's what happens. When the CPA engages in this and their eyes are open and the clients love it, the CPA is going to get additional revenue. That's a fact, because the client's going to need, it could be helping set up an exit plan and charging for that. It could be, in some cases, we use captive insurance companies. It could be helping create the C Corp that has the micro captive, right? That I don't do that, right? We have partners, or the CPA would do that. So if the CPA gets it, it's actually first and foremost, again, good for the client, but the CPA will actually generate more bottom line revenue.
We use a lot of the same strategies. We just call them a little something different, but that's phenomenal. But what I think that you guys are doing is having everything in one place with one cohesive team, I should say. Hopefully they're coherent too. But yeah,
most days, Chris. Most days, almost always. By the way, I wish your guests could see John's face. Like he's either like, he gives this great beaming grin smile that's inspiring, or this kind of cringe, like, what the hell did Chris just say or Taylor just say?
The dialogue between you guys is epic, though. I will say that.
Well, thank you.
It's awesome. And that's why I love doing these shows, because I don't have to say a whole lot when there's much smarter people than me on here. And then I really do get to eavesdrop. and take a lot of notes. Like I'm notorious for sticky notes. No one will probably see this clip, but I got more stickies than I know what to do with.
Well, I know that. So, a couple things, just speaking of it as a tax professional, definitely take the time and follow Questmont Virtual Family Office on socials. I know you guys do a lot of good stuff on LinkedIn.
By the way, if you have CPAs who want to reach out, we'll make sure we do all kinds of advanced thought leadership. We would be happy to plug them into that. Like, here's a real quick one. And this, I don't make money on this, but I wrote this about a year ago. This is my first venture. I wrote it. It's not ghost written crap. I called it Dead Cats and Wealth Advisors, Exposing the Myths and Lies of the Wealth Management Industry. And I want to say, number one, no cats were harmed in the writing of the book. It's an old Pennsylvania Dutch saying where a Pennsylvania Dutch, my grandmother might say, you can't swing a dead cat without hitting a lawyer, right? Or you can't swing a dead cat without hitting an insurance agent. So I just expanded it to include, I got to confess, I'm not a big fan of the wealth management industry. In my opinion, the industry is skewed to protect itself, not the client. And so it's meant mostly, though, Chris, this is a tool to empower business owners, right? It really is kind of meant to, like, a lot of our toolbox is in here. The processes we use, it's in there. That's on Amazon, Audible, ebook, or paperback.
Well, definitely check it out. I don't read well, but I listen to a lot of books because I like to walk and exercise, and I don't mind a car ride. What's the best way for someone that's listening? Again, they're probably thinking about this, thinking, I've got that one, I got that two, maybe client. How do they get in touch? What's the best way for them to get in touch with you? And then also learn more about the thought leadership resources that Questmont has.
I would say, Chris, I'm not too important to speak with them personally, right? I love what I do. It's become, how do I say this? I'm fairly successful. I could retire, but that's not in my DNA, right? So I love to help. I mean, I really do, especially if it's talking about business owners. So have them, I'll give myself, call me, 717-571-1324. Just please identify yourself that you came through this institute. Right. So I know why you're calling. And then also my email, it's tranker, TRANKER at Questmont, QUESTMONT.com. And again, just say you're a fan of Chris's and let's chat. And we do this all the time. Like we'll do, like what we would do is we would do an exploratory call with the CPA and or their partners first.
Right.
But let's say they got to the point where they understood the process. Then we would actually set up an exploratory call with the client and the CPA.
Right. Well, I appreciate it, man. I've learned a lot. I'm thinking about, some of our clients and, some of their needs, and as they grow and as they plan to exit. This is exciting. We appreciate it.
It is a pleasure. Here's the good news. I'll close with this thought. I mean, again, I told you that our one family office group does all this research. That's how we know the gaps. Here's a little bit of one thing I'm encouraged by. When they completed the 2023 research, there was a 550% increase where these wealthy business owners are dissatisfied with their current advisors. So here's what I'm going to say to CPAs, and I say this with love and respect. If you want to be top earning, relevant in the future, and work with these high net worth business owners, you're going to have to get your mind around their demand. The business owners are essentially demanding, Chris, that CPAs and elite wealth advisors work together. They're demanding it. So you're either ahead of that curve or the business owners are going to find another solution. Mm-hmm. So the good news is business owners are realizing mainly the traditional wealth management industry is not serving them. Like we see people who are paying $200,000 a year in investment advisory fees, and that advisors never talk to their CPA. What the hell? You can't possibly advise a family if you're not talking, coordinating, and not reading their tax returns. That's unethical. That pisses me off, quite frankly. How about I shut up there before I go on?
And you know what? One of the things I have written on my board here is evolve or erode. You've got to evolve, and tax professionals or get the heck out. And unfortunately, I shouldn't say unfortunately, but there's a lot lead getting the heck out. and that's okay. If it's time to replace your engine, and if that car's dead, you're ready to hang up your mouse, move on. But if you're looking to grow your practice, if you're looking to help your clients and be a part of the biggest decisions of their life, then you've got to keep your mind open and evolve and collaborate.
Yep. And I just want to say again, I'm here. If anybody that's listening to your show wants some help, I would gladly have a chat with them.
And Chris, I don't know if you should be more proud that you brought on a great guest for this one, or you made a car reference that actually made sense. So kudos.
Well, John, I'm trying to keep up with you on our other podcast. For those that don't know, John's a marketing person. More than that, of course, he's a little bit of a gearhead. He's got his general contractor license, and all this other good stuff. However, John mentioned depreciation recapture, and it actually made sense. So I'm trying to keep up with him now.
And now we just got to find the soundbite of mic drop, and
There
then
you
we'll
go.
start throwing those in here. But honestly, Taylor, thanks for joining us on this, man. I mean, this is, I mean, Chris said he knew very little on it. I knew almost absolutely nothing on this topic. So this was awesome to dive into it. And yeah, we'll have you back again too. And I look forward to actually going through this again and listening to this a couple times. Even though I don't need or get a CPE for listening to this, it's a great story, man. I love how you shared how you got into it, and then, how you guys operate, but then also you kind of walked us through the whole journey, right? Like all the way to the end on what you guys do and where you're going and the type of clients you have. I appreciate that.
Thank you for noticing. That's very validating. I'm not very good, honestly, at many things. My wife, Sonia, is my lead business partner here. Anything that's broken in our household, she repairs, right? Or I got a guy. So my point is, I decided, like, I like cars, but I don't know. Someone asked me, what's the engine in your car? And I'm like, it's powerful. Like, I'm not a gearhead, but I love the output. So what I decided, Chris, is I decided I was going to be the best at this. That was a conscious choice a decade or so ago. I'm not good at many things, so I'm going to be really, really good at this. And I've just become, if you can't tell, kind of passionate.
Absolutely.
Purpose drives passion, vice versa. So Taylor, thanks for joining us. Chris, great guest. We're going to let everybody off the hook here on this one. Again, show notes, check them out. Connect with us, connect with Taylor. You will not be disappointed.
Gentlemen, if you're ever in Tampa, I'll host you. You let me know.
Oh, consider it done.
Hey, all right.
Absolutely. All right, gentlemen, thank you so much, everybody. Again, listening to this, be sure to stay in touch with us, and we will connect everybody where you want to go.
You've been listening to the Mr. R Show, presented by the MRR Institute. For more content like this, be sure to check us out on YouTube for weekly expert tips. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast to stay updated on the latest strategies for scaling and modernizing your tax practice. Looking for more? Contact us at mrrinstitute.com for practice resources, coaching opportunities, and a peer-to-peer mastermind group. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
The content of this podcast does not constitute an offer of securities. Offerings can only be made through an offering memorandum, and you should carefully examine the risk factors and other information contained in the memorandum. The content provided is for educational purposes only. We encourage you to seek personalized investment advice from your financial professional. For all tax and legal advice, please consult your CPA or attorney. Investment advisory services are offered through Cabin Advisors, a registered investment advisor. Securities are offered through Cabin Securities, a registered broker-dealer.